Welcome to the Phillip Jordan Football Podcast. Phillip Jordan and his football friends discuss the latest headlines on the field and off. Whether it's during the season in the fall, countdown to signing day, or on the road to the draft, Phillip has you covered. Now let's kick it off with your host, Phillip Jordan.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Podcast. Happy Tuesday to you. I hope you're having a fantastic start to your week. We are in August. We are heading closer and closer to football season. Hopefully we'll have a college football season. It looks pretty safe. We're going to have an NFL season. It's the start of it. High school here in Alabama. Not so sure. You know, guys, I am the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Wolves Football on 96.9 The Legend. We were supposed to kick off this Friday with the first game with Dothan at Hoover. That has been canceled due to COVID-19. The first two games have been. So just kind of cross our fingers we can get a high school football season in. And also, you can check me out at Last Word on College Football, where I'll write about the Auburn Tigers, do some SEC stuff, do little off articles on different teams sometimes as well. Of course, you can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. Really means a lot if you do that. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And you can follow me on all social media at PJordanSEC. And you can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. So, I have a fantastic guest today. I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. Jordan Dajani, he covers the NFL for CBS Sports. We are going to be talking about the AFC because, look, this is not just a college football podcast. Talk about college football lately, but I do want to talk about the NFL, what's going on with that, and some other stuff as well. So we're going to get to that in a second. Really fantastic conversation I had with Jordan for about 25 minutes. We also talk about Alex Smith on the start of that interview. But something I was thinking about over the weekend and kind of just really processing and where this show is at, where I am at as a podcaster. Of course, everybody makes fun of me. I've done several different shows. But when I first started podcasting, something I did, yes, I had a guest, but I also had it open where I gave my thoughts on something going on in the world of sports, football, whatever was going on. Sometimes it was just a funny joke or anecdote, but other times it's serious, my maybe unfiltered thoughts on something going on. So that is what I'm going to start doing here in the podcast. So it may go 10, 15 minutes, give my thoughts on that. Then we'll jump to the guest and we'll close out the show after that. So that's what's going to start going down on the podcast going forward. Some weeks I'm going to do 2 shows. Some weeks I'm going to do 1. I am giving you 2 podcasts this week. Thursday, I'm scheduled to be joined by Troy Sadowski, former NFL tight end, a 1988 All-American tight end for Georgia Bulldogs. We'll get his thoughts on everything going on, get a former player's take. So I'm really looking forward to talking with Troy later this week. But anyways, here is today's open. So as you guys know, and if you listen to this podcast, you know college football has been the big talking point in the football world, really. It feels like even national media, you don't really hear much about NFL yet. NFL's got training camp going on, what they're doing with their protocols with COVID and stuff like that. You did see some referees opt out for the season, and a couple weeks ago you had the deadline for the player to opt out as well. And when it comes to NFL, this situation is actually easier for them than college or high school because when you look at it that way, NFL players are on campuses, high school or college, so they're not around, let's say, the general population. So, in theory, they can go to practice or go to games and go home. Now, we know not all of them are doing that, but that's kind of like where we stand with that. Now, with college football last week, now, Monday's show with Matt Murcell, we talked about what could happen, and then we saw the news on Tuesday. Where the Big Ten and Pac-12 announced they will not have a season. They're suspending or postponing their season. I get to that in a minute about the postponement of it. But then you said, okay, the SEC is going to do this thing because the SEC is not going to be told what to do, particularly by the Big Ten. And let's look, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 pretty much do the same thing anyways. I've said this before. The Pac-12 just does whatever the Big Ten is going to do. They just follow their lead on mostly anything. Now, I will say this. I think the Pac-12 has handled things a whole lot better than the Big Ten this past week. But I'll pivot back to that in a second. So then you have the ACC. So you have the SEC and the ACC, who 2 other conferences I think kind of think alike. They don't necessarily follow each other, but they have the same thought process, I believe. So the linchpin and everything was the Big 12. would the Big 12 do it? And that was really the whole thing. It was coming down. The college football season was coming down to, would the Big 12 play? And they decided they are going to move forward playing. Now, you hear this, and of course you have the Sun Belt, Conference USA, and the AAC also look like they are going to play as well. And Notre Dame, we all know, independent, they're jumping over to the ACC for one season. Now, this is good news for college football fans. It's exciting. You're getting games. And then on Monday, the SEC did announce their schedule. Of course, we had known for weeks they were going to play their first games on September 26th. ACC may play theirs a couple of weeks earlier, and the Big 12 is doing the 26th as well. So they're moving forward with what they're going to do. So we have 3 of the 5 of the Power Conference going ahead with their seasons. Interesting with the Sun Belt, Conference USA, and the American Athletic Conference. I really felt like all the Group of 5s would not play. But they are going to go ahead, and it looks like they're moving ahead with seasons 2 as well, which is huge, and I'm glad because, hey, as I mentioned many times, I don't live that far from Troy. I'm a big supporter, let's say fan, of the Troy Trojans, and know a lot of people over there, so I'm glad to see they are going to have a season. So we know what we have going there. There's those 3. They're going to keep pushing forward. But at the same time, we do need to realize and prepare ourselves that there is still a chance that those conferences may not play also. So I'm almost in the mindset, okay, let's just look at this thing day by day, week by week, until they actually play. You just have to do it that way. You can't get too excited that, oh, right, the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 are playing, but you can be excited that they are moving in the right directions, and they believe they have protocols in place, their data, that you can have a season. But, of course, with everything with the coronavirus, everything is fluid. Anything can change from day to day. Now, let's look over at the Big 10 and the Pac-12. The Pac-12, I'll start with them. They have obviously had a better handle on things as a conference working together this thing. Because Larry Scott, they came out and made a decision that they were going to postpone or cancel the fall season, all sports. So you're not playing any sport in the Pac-12 until January 1st, 2021. But the difference between them and the Big Ten here is the fact is you haven't heard any Pac-12 coaches come out and disagree against what the conference did. It's really, they're in unison here. It really feels like that with the Pac-12 and the coaches, players, all parts together. So they are on solid ground, I think. Now, I'm going to get this. Hold up. That's a different thought. Let's stay on topic here. Now, Big Ten, on the other hand, with Kevin Warren. So this is his first year as the commissioner of the Big Ten. And, wow, what a way to get started in your regime, your era as the commissioner of a conference. So now they come out, and the reports came out that it was a 12-2 vote from the presidents to postpone or cancel the Big Ten season. Now, you have seen Jim Harbaugh be very vocal, Scott Frost at Nebraska be very vocal, Ryan Day, the head coach of Ohio State, being very vocal about they were not happy with that decision. Now, they can't break off from the conference. Now, is Nebraska going to try to just play like an almost independent schedule? Who knows how that can work? But the Big Ten's in a mess right now. You talked about the Pac-12 being in unison in what they're doing. That is the exact opposite of what the Big Ten's doing right now. They are a mess. And then you see over the weekend, and bravo to him. And I know that some people out there, old school fans, maybe are not happy about this. Players standing up and really voicing their opinion because that's something you've seen in college athletics before. Players usually didn't speak out too much because, you was worried about the ramifications of it. If you upset your coach, boosters, athletic program. But now seeing guys like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, two guys that could go 1 and 2 in the NFL draft, obviously going to be the top 2 quarterbacks taken next year in the NFL draft, really voicing their opinion. Of course, a couple weeks ago when you thought everybody was going to cancel, when that was the rumor, Trevor Lawrence was really, really vocal on Twitter, hashtag we want to play. And then over this past weekend, you see where Justin Field started a petition. And last I saw, and this number has probably changed, obviously, 200,000 signatures for the Big Ten to reverse their decision to play. And I have seen some stuff online on Twitter. Maybe the Big Ten will reverse their decision. There's just not a collective agreement on what the Big Ten is doing right now. And when you look at this from another standpoint, recruiting. Now, people are going to go to Ohio State. People are going to go to Michigan. People are going to go to Penn State. Those schools, those names, they're going to go there. So I don't necessarily think if the Big Ten does not play this year that is going to really put a hurting on them recruiting-wise. I mean, it'll have an impact, but not to the level where they're just going to become like a mid-major group of five school. You'll still have that. Now, I think the Pac-12, on the other hand, is going to be in a world of hurt with this recruiting-wise because they already are looked at as the worst of the five conferences. But I will say this. I can make an argument, and I'm not going to do that here because it's going to be a completely too long of an opening segment. But the Pac-12 from top to bottom was better than the ACC last year. Now, the ACC's got Clemson, so you automatically just give them the nod that they're better, but not necessarily. When you look at teams like Oregon, Washington, USC was a solid team. I mean, not great, obviously, not what you're used to seeing there. Utah, schools like that, you put them against outside of Clemson in the ACC, as long as Florida State's down, Miami's down, North Carolina, they got a lot of hype coming into this year. You've got Virginia Tech, yeah. But I'll take some of them Pac-12 schools over those ACC schools. But perception is reality. You know, that's what we're always told. That's what we hear. That's what you see on a bunch of other shows. The Pac-12 is going to get hurt by this severely from a recruiting standpoint. I really believe that because the big schools out east are going into the west side of the country, and they are getting players, and it's going to put the Pac-12 behind big time. I wonder what happens with Larry Scott in the future. Not now, buyouts, money is not there because of COVID. But back to the Big Ten now. If they reverse field, and I don't know if they will or not. I mean, that's a worse look potentially than doing what you did anyway. But if the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 are able to get their seasons off and have a season, the Big Ten is going to look really, really bad here. They are the second best conference in college football. Yes, I'm in the South. Call me an SEC homer you want, but SEC is the best conference in college football. We all know this. It's nothing. I'm not breaking news here for anybody. If I am, I'm sorry that you've been living under a rock your whole life following college athletics. But the SEC is the best, but the Big Ten is next. I put the Big 12 at 3. Most people put the ACC at 4, and you would put the Pac-12. So that's kind of like the order of things you'll see there. But if those three have a season and the Big Ten doesn't, and they do not reverse course or whatever, if they can, it's going to be a bad look for them. And there's going to be some stuff. They're just going to have to fix an image, I think. Because, look, and I say this is a different time. And if you are going with safety, that's fine. If you do not feel safe with the virus or playing football this year, that's fine. Nobody, I think, is going to incredibly come after you for it. But at the same time, it does look bad, though, when some of your universities are going to have students on campus. And then the simple fact is, you're saying you can have all them guys together, all these students together, but you can't play football. And then this is really what got me last week. The fact is, you're having them still practice, go through all the drills, they can do all that stuff, but you can't play games. If you're so worried about the games, transferring the virus or someone getting the virus, why are you having drills? You should not be doing any of that if you're concerned with that. Look, I'm not going to go too much into this, but this does reek of politics. And you guys, anybody that knows me a long time, know I don't talk about politics on my show, so I just don't do it. But it does reek of that. And here's something else I want to touch on. And I'm very curious with this. And I've had some conversations with people I know that covers the sport too. And it's kind of you think about it, it may be too early to talk about this or bring this up. How does college football playoff work? I mean, you got the Big 12, you got the ACC and the SEC. So you would probably think you're all, obviously, if you do a 14 playoff, 2 teams are getting in for one conference. The SEC should be that, if I had to call it right now. But obviously, this is a partnership with all 5 of them. So what happens there? And of course, you got Ohio State sitting there. They would be a team I would pick to get to college football playoff. And I would go with Alabama out of the SEC. Of course, Clemson. Big 12 would be interesting. Oklahoma, but who wants to put Oklahoma in there? Do they want to? I don't know what's happened with that team when they get in the playoff. They look good in the Big 12, but they get in the playoff. Defensively, they just cannot hang. That's going to be an interesting part of this, the college football playoff. How is that decided? What do you do with that going forward? So, a lot of stuff going on, but you do have hope. There is hope that there will be a college football season. But at the same time, I do think we all need to prepare ourselves that love college football, that love the sport, that there may not be a season because things could change. But the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 are doing everything they can. And why not? You have till September 26th to make your decision. That was the other thing with it. Why are you such in a hurry, Big 10 and Pac-12? Wait until you get to this point. We're the SEC, the Big 12. Now, I know the ACC starting a week or two early than those two are. But wait, why did you have to make that decision in early August? Get closer into September, then make your decision. I didn't understand that either, why they had to rush so quickly to do that. So it's going to be interesting. There's probably going to be more that comes out with this by the time the next podcast comes out on Thursday. So if that is the case, I will give my thoughts once again. Well, guys, there's enough of that. Now I want to jump over to some NFL talk. So here is my conversation with CBS Sports NFL writer Jordan Dajani. Everybody joining me today on the Phillip Jordan Football Podcast is Jordan Dajani. He covers the NFL for CBS Sports. And Jordan, I told you this off air, but I do appreciate you taking the time out and being on the show today.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, I think we followed each other back on Twitter for some time now, and I've always meant to ask you and never got around to it, so I apologize for taking so long, but I do appreciate you taking the time. And I do. And the thing about it, I'll admit this, the last several weeks on this podcast has been nothing about the news for college football, and that is still going on, but it is refreshing just for me, selfishly, as the host here, to talk about the NFL, kind of get away from that at least for a little bit.
Yeah, I understand. It's absolutely crazy what's going on in college, and people are asking me what I think is going to happen, and it's great because I have no idea, and it doesn't really affect me yet, right? The NFL calendar will adjust whenever the college football calendar adjusts, so it doesn't really bother me right now, but I am interested to see what happens.
Yeah, that's I guess thing when you do a college football and an NFL podcast, but when that kind of took on its own legs, I guess. So it's been all we're talking about. But I am going to have you on talk the NFL because I am very intrigued with the season coming up. And of course, we're going to dive deep into the AFC and kind of look at the favorites there and kind of get your thoughts on who you think is going to come out with the AFC or who are the better teams there. But obviously, over in the NFC, it's got some pretty encouraging news. I really think it's something that's great to see now with, I guess, with everything going on in the world, some positive news, and that was with Alex Smith, and that's just a tremendous story from where he was when he basically shattered his leg, all the surgeries he's gone through, even a threat to lose his leg, and the fact that he's even getting rule where he can actually get involved with football TV, that's just an amazing and such a great positive story over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And, excuse me, I used to work on the Redskins beat when I was with 247 Sports, and they had an NFL sector. So I was covering, the game when it happened and all the crazy similarities that went into that injury. And then, of course, how serious, the developments that came out of that injury were. And I remember my boss had me write an article about Alex Smith losing his leg just so we had it ready to go, because we thought that was definitely a possibility that would happen. And then it got even more serious, and there was threats to his life. I would have never imagined that he would be able to pull off this incredible comeback. And, his interview today with Washington was pretty interesting, too. He said something that kind of stuck with me. He said that he would have a hard time looking at his kids, like, in the eyes and telling them to, put all the effort they can into whatever they want to do if he didn't do it himself. And that's pretty crazy, because I'm sure that any one of us, if we suffered the injury he did, we'd probably lie down and we'd probably call it a career, right? But Alex Smith he's not wired that way. He wants to come in and compete, and it's pretty outstanding what he's done so far.
Yeah, it does feel like when we talk about the top competitors at quarterback in the National Football League, he doesn't get mentioned a lot for that. But for, everything with him, when you look at his career, didn't start out the way he wanted to as the number one pick, and then he gets beat out by Colin Kaepernick. Then Pat Mahomes happens, Kansas City, and he was playing well with Washington too before that injury happened. Just his competitive nature, I think, does not get talked a lot about when you compare him to the other quarterbacks.
Yeah, he's had like a really sad career. I mean, he was the number one overall pick. He appeared to be a bust at some point, and then he finally started getting going, and he was playing well for the 49ers, and they were having a great season. And then he went down with an injury that knocked him out for a few weeks. And, of course, that's when Colin Kaepernick came, and, we can't blame Harbaugh in that situation. He had to roll with what was working, so that's when Kaepernick took them to the Super Bowl. Then Smith went to the Chiefs. He played really well there. I mean, the last year before, and they drafted Patrick Mahomes, of course, at number 10 overall, but Alex Smith had one more year as the starter, and he actually put up career-high numbers as the Chiefs went to the playoffs. But still, everyone was way too excited for Patrick Mahomes, and sure enough, that was the right decision, because Mahomes is now the highest-paid athlete in the history of ever. So Alex Smith has to go to Washington. Like you said, he has that team on the right track. They were actually number one in the division for a point in time, and then he went down with that catastrophic injury. So it's been a lot. There's a lot of tragedies that has happened in the career of Alex Smith, but this is a huge win. Just the fact that he's able to, 1, be alive, 2, able to walk on his own, and 3, he's back on the football field, dropping back and throwing the football. So really cool to see.
Yeah, it was just amazing when I saw that. That's just one of them stories you root for stuff like that, and he seems like a great guy, and you root for people like that. When we talk about this upcoming season, and like I said, we're going to jump to the AFC, but overall, when you look at the fact is that we're not going to have a preseason, when the season does start, it's got to be one of them deals where you got to look toward the teams that have been together with the coaching staffs, the players, not with a lot of turnover coming in, because you got to expect a little bit. It's going to take a few weeks for these teams to really get going and kind of get in a rhythm, a little bit longer than probably what we're used to when you do have a preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, familiar faces are your friends in this time and age. Just having a team together, if you didn't lose a lot of starters on either side of the ball, that's going to greatly benefit you entering this unprecedented time. So you look at teams like the Buffalo Bills. I mean, they didn't have a lot of turnover. All they did was kind of add pieces on both sides of the ball. And then, of course, the Patriots. I mean, they did have some more turnover, but with Bill Belichick and Andy Reid of the Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, those are guys who are probably more suited well enough to, enter this unprecedented time and try to find a certain level of success. It's going to be interesting to see how it all happens, because I'm sure even if a team didn't experience a lot of turnover, it's still going to take a couple weeks for them to really get going. And we know that every game matters in the NFL, so no one can afford a slow start, but they're bound to happen.
And when you look at the AFC, completely new era, it feels like. I mean, even last year kind of ushered in a little bit, even though Brady and the Patriots, they were in the playoffs with the Chiefs, went into Super Bowl, but you have the Ravens, and it just feels like it's Chiefs and Ravens. For you, just looking at the AFC as a whole, who do you see as that third team this year?
Yeah, I think the Tennessee Titans might have a chance. Obviously, they were in the AFC Championship game last year. They beat the Chiefs in the regular season, beat the Ravens in Baltimore in the postseason, which was a pretty big upset, of course. So I think the Titans obviously are warranted when it comes to that conversation about number 3 overall. John Robinson did a good job re-signing both Ryan Tannehill at quarterback position and then Derrick Henry as well. Those were the two pieces that really made the Titans have a successful year in 2019. So you have to at least have the Titans as a possibility in there at number 3. Staying in a division, I mean, if Phillip Rivers can come in and play like the talented Pro Bowl quarterback that he is, that we did not see last year for the Chargers, the Colts have a very talented team, and they were killed by injuries last year, and Jacoby Brissett really didn't get a fair shake at the job. So the Colts have potential there. And how about the Buffalo Bills? I mean, it looks like it's their division to win now with Tom Brady now in the NFC South. So Josh Allen took a big step forward. That team, like I already mentioned, added some nice pieces on both sides of the ball. I like their head coach, Sean McDermott. For the first time ever, Josh Allen has a true number 1 wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. So expect them to take another leap forward. I expect double-digit wins. So they're another team that has the possibility to maybe be that number 3. But when it comes to the narrative of the AFC, sadly, I have to agree with what everybody's talking about. Ravens, Chiefs. I believe that those two teams, at least one of them is going to meet up in the AFC Championship game, and I expect one of them to go to the Super Bowl as well.
You just mentioned the Buffalo Bills. I guess we start off jumping from division to division with the AFC East. And, of course, we're talking about continuity, and they have it with their coaching staff. You've mentioned Sean McDermott, his 4th year. Leslie Frazier, defense coordinator, he's been there. He's going to his 4th year. And then you have Brian DeBall in his 3rd year as like an offense coordinator. And with Josh Allen, it just feels like they have done a lot the last couple of years building this team. And it does seem right this year they should be the favorites in that division, especially for the Patriots. And they've had a lot of players opt out due to COVID concerns as well. But with Josh Allen, just with him, from this team just being a good team that wins a division or potentially a team that could challenge and get to a conference championship game, how much of a jump do you think he has to make as a quarterback?
I think the offense in general has to make a jump because you're going to have to score more points than the Buffalo Bills did last year. I mean, the Bills were not a fun team to watch, but they were hammering out wins because their defense controlled the momentum of the game. Now, if you can maintain that defensive success and then have Josh Allen take a step forward in terms of his downfield accuracy, how he works off of play action, obviously continue to build that football IQ, know when to tuck and run because he definitely is a weapon when he does that. You just want to see him continue to get more comfortable in the offense, put up a couple more highlight reel plays every single week. The Bills are going to be under a microscope because they are expected to win that AFC East and go to the playoffs again. But sometimes teams don't rise to that occasion, right? So it's going to be interesting to see if Josh Allen can continue to get more comfortable in the offense, can recognize that the Bills are under a microscope and finally finish through and do well in the division and make it into the playoffs and don't blow a double-digit lead this time in the postseason. So I don't know if Josh Allen exactly needs to become a Pro Bowler and no doubt one of the best quarterbacks in the AFC per se, but he does have to improve. The offense does have to put up more points, however they do it. And then the Buffalo Bills, like I said, I do think that they possibly can get to that double-digit win figure again and hopefully win a playoff game or two.
And just make sure he avoids heaving the ball backwards when he gets around midfield when he's running with it. That's the most important thing.
Exactly. See, that's that whole football IQ thing I'm talking about. Like, I watched the Bills a lot last year, and like I said, no one really did because they're not some entertaining team. But Josh Allen clearly is this young talent, and I think he has the strongest arm in the NFL. But when we got to the playoffs, that's where you kind of saw that breakdown of football IQ. I mean, he'd never been in a situation like that before. Yeah, he did really great on the first opening drive and the drives after that and got a double-digit lead, but being able to finish the game on the road, that's something that you can't learn until you're placed in that situation. So there was a couple of embarrassing gaffes that did come out of that game, but at the same time, that's going to be an invaluable learning experience for a young quarterback, and I think it's going to be a big reason that the Bills can at least hopefully win one postseason game this upcoming season.
And of course, staying in the division, you look at the New England Patriots. You know, they bring in Cam Newton. Tom Brady is gone. It's still weird coming out of my mouth saying that. I just cannot believe that we're going to see Tom Brady in a different jersey, and he's not there with Belichick and the Patriots anymore. But you also got the Jarrett Stidham there, and you would think, okay, that's going to be a competition, but I guess you would assume Newton may end up being the quarterback there. When you look at this, Belichick's still there, the system's still in place. What are your expectations right now as we're talking in mid-August for the New England Patriots?
Yeah, just ignoring for a second all the COVID opt-outs they had, and a lot of important players, of course, opted out for them. The X factor is, of course, Cam Newton. But when I say that, I mean more specifically the X factor of Cam Newton is that right shoulder. We know that he went down with that shoulder injury. Of course, his throwing arm. A couple of years ago, they cut the 2018 season short for him. During that offseason, it was very weird because he did some kind of exploratory procedure to go just poking around, seeing what was up with that shoulder. Nothing serious, but it was interesting because he had to change up his entire throwing motion that offseason as well. And if you watched him at all in the 2 games he played, he didn't look like the same Cam Newton. So he didn't even throw 1 touchdown in those 2 losses he started. So he's someone that still is learning that whole new throwing motion. He hasn't had a lot of live reps with the new throwing motion. So that's something that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. And we all know when Cam Newton's on his game, he's an MVP caliber player, somebody who could come into any team in the NFL and take them to a new level offensively. But I still am curious about how that shoulder is holding up. Can he get his throwing motion down? And, of course, this is his first change of scenery, right? So that's going to be interesting to see how he does in learning the offense under someone who's a great mind like Bill Belichick. There's a lot of question marks, and I feel like we're going to be able to figure it out pretty quickly if Cam Newton is that same player. But his health truly is the biggest X factor, and I don't feel like it's getting talked about enough.
Yeah, with him, and I got thinking about this, when he was in Carolina, as much as he gets talked about for his running ability, it just felt like a rarity that he actually took off and ran. It seemed like with Carolina, there was all design runs. But if it was a pass play, he was pretty much the kind of guy that was going to stay in the pocket. Of course, we talk about the injuries. You don't want him running around too much and getting hurt if he is your starter. But I would kind of like to see him do a little bit more of that. If play breaks down, take off a little bit more than maybe he did in Carolina. But, not too much because, like I said, you don't want to get him hurt.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because that's a fact. During his rookie season, there were a lot of times where he tucked and run because he had that athletic ability. He didn't exactly trust his arm up to an NFL level yet. Now, as his career wore on, obviously the quarterback position is the most important position in football. So the coaching staff realized that, and like you said, they wanted to make sure that he maintained his health, which is obviously he's run into those problems over the course of his career. So that's why they try to make him into somewhat of a pocket passer, fill the traditional role of a quarterback, tuck and run when you have to, but of course try to protect your body. Now with the Patriots, I don't think we should expect him to become a Michael Vick, but he still is more mobile than Tom Brady. And it's going to be kind of the first time since a couple games with Jacoby Brissett maybe a few years ago where Bill Belichick is going to have an athletic, mobile quarterback who can kind of think on the fly, escape the pocket if he needs to. So they have that potential. They have that possibility with Cam Newton now under center. So it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize him, how much they want him to use that athletic ability, because it's obviously a plus to your offense. It's something that you couldn't do with Tom Brady.
Oh, when you look over at the AFC North, and we didn't talk about the Ravens, you expect them to be health is good with them. They should win that division. They should be the favorite. So when I look at the division, my intrigue is at number 2 because you got the Cleveland Browns there. Of course, last year they were the team that, with all the expectations going into the season, they did address some offensive line issues because Baker Mayfield got sacked 40 times last year. But then you got the Steelers, and I'm always intrigued with them with Big Ben coming back. If he's healthy, how good they can be. So when you look at those 2 teams there, who do you see as the team, maybe not challenge the Ravens, but could be that number 2 team in that division?
Man, I'm with you. This is one of the most intriguing divisions in my mind because that number 2 spot is totally up for grabs. On one hand, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers who have one of the best defenses in the NFL, a lot of young players on that side of the ball. And then, of course, you have Ben Roethlisberger, who's probably a future Pro Football Hall of Famer coming back from injury. Now, it was a fairly serious injury, but it sounds from all the reports we're getting from camp, he's able to throw the ball, and he looks like the same old Big Ben, shed some weight. So the Steelers are obviously going to be better than just a 500 team in 2020. Now, with the Cleveland Browns, this is what I got to say to everybody. Last year, the hype rolling in on them was too much, okay? They added some nice pieces like Odell Beckham and a couple great defensive stars, but they had a first-year head coach who was known as a player's coach. The stars weren't aligning in my mind for this team to have a winning record and get to the playoffs, even if I did believe Baker Mayfield was truly the answer. Now, fast forward, they took their lumps, all right? And now they have a real head coach who I actually like, Kevin Stefanski, who I think can right the ship in Cleveland. And this offseason, they're not getting a lot of hype like they were last year. So in my mind, this is the year we should be keeping an eye on the Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield. They are going to have a better record than 6-10. They are definitely going to be battling the Pittsburgh Steelers for that number 2 spot. It would not surprise me at all if they went 10-6 per se and had that number 2 spot behind the Ravens, get to the postseason with Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, I was with you last year. I just saw that with Freddie Kitchens with them. I was like, I'm not sure if he's the guy. Maybe down the road he can be a really good coach in the NFL, but to just jump into that situation he was put in, I won't say you needed a veteran, but you needed somebody that was a little bit more of a stabilizer with those personalities, with Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, so many personalities with that team. That was a tall task just pretty much for most coaches, I think, especially a first-year head coach like Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was probably the hardest job in the NFL at that point to be a first-year head coach. Your GM is doing a good job acquiring talent. Now, all the national attention all of a sudden goes to you. I mean, trust me, if you ask Bill Belichick, he would say that's the worst thing in the world. I don't want any attention on me, as I'm trying to learn as I go and being a head coach of an entirely different franchise. Now, with Stefanski, I'm really impressed just with his career path, how he's worked his way up, quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. He really helped Kirk Cousins take that step forward. So I believe he's somebody that could come in and be that professional coach, somebody who does have a bright future in this league. And he's got a lot of talent to work with. I mean, just look at the Cleveland Browns on paper, their wide receivers and their running back talent. And then, of course, Baker Mayfield, if he can kind of give us more than he did last year, some of those flashes of the potential rookie of the year candidate, former number 1 overall pick, he's got that potential. So I think that Stefanski was a huge addition for the Browns, and that's why I'm pretty high on them entering this year.
Yeah, and then you mentioned this a little bit when I asked you the question, who is the third best team in the conference? And you talked about the Titans, and you even brought up the Colts with Phillip Rivers. But I think team I don't think brought up was the Texans, and I'm intrigued by them just with, okay, they got rid of Hopkins, trade off. Then there's this joke, I think, online of you like the head coach Bill O'Brien, but Bill O'Brien is maybe not everybody's favorite there. With Deshaun Watson, and look, his rookie contract is closing up quick. He's going to be one of these next quarterbacks that you would expect to get a big payday. And it feels like if you want to really catch a Super Bowl, it's when your franchise quarterback is on a rookie contract. With the Texans, just where do you see this franchise going?
Yeah, it's a huge question mark. I mean, obviously they want to secure Deshaun Watson, and I feel like it's a big win just having him at the negotiating table, because at some point when they traded DeAndre Hopkins away, I was curious if he wanted to get out himself and they were just going to have a fire sale. So securing Deshaun Watson is obviously the first priority, and then of course trying to build around him. And it really hurts losing Hopkins because Bill Barnwell of ESPN brought up this crazy stat. Like, Watson's only basically taken a few snaps under center without DeAndre Hopkins out wide. Like, the offense is going to look entirely different. I still feel like they can be in the playoff hunt, especially with the added postseason spot in the AFC. But I'm not expecting them to repeat and have the trifecta of winning the AFC South 3 years in a row. I don't even know what their ceiling is. It'd be very surprising to me if they could get to 10 wins. And going back to that trade for a second, I mean, David Johnson, when he's healthy, he is one of the better running backs in the NFL. So I do believe he can bring something to this offense. But of course, trading him away, not getting a first-round pick, and getting David Johnson from DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, Hopkins was one of the pillars of your offensive attack. So that's just going to be a big loss as it is. But they're going to have to move forward. And obviously drafting is going to be very important when it comes to resetting and rebuilding your team. So I think they did a decent job in the 2020 NFL draft. But moving forward, that's obviously going to be priority number 1 after they get Deshaun Watson signed to an extension.
And then finally with the AFC West, I mean, you got Kansas City, and they pretty much bring everybody back. And yes, Damian Williams at running back, I mean, that's one of your playmakers. He opts out, but I think that was a brilliant draft pick by getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just seeing what he did at LSU, not only as a running back out of the backfield, but as also a receiver. Just give Patrick Mahomes somebody else to throw the ball to. That's all he needed. But when you look at that division overall, you look at the Raiders, and it really looks like that's a quarterback problem waiting to happen with Mariota and Carr, because to me it looks like Gruden does not like Derek Carr at all. You see a lot of the Broncos, and they've made some good moves trying to build a team around Drew Lock, and of course the Chargers, they're in complete rebuild mode with rookie quarterback they drafted Justin Herbert. So when you look at the AFC West after Kansas City, where are you seeing that division?
Yeah, the AFC West is another one of those really intriguing conferences. And, I'll start with the Raiders. I think that they have some momentum moving forward into 2020. Of course, Josh Jacobs had a really nice rookie year. But you look at some of their weapons. I mean, Henry Ruggs III. They got Brian Edwards out of South Carolina. And then they got that, the Lynn Bowden guy from Kentucky who played quarterback, receiver, running back, punter, defensive tackle, every position on the field, who I really like, an electric playmaker. So I think they have some great weapons to build around. But like you said, the quarterback position is going to be the ultimate factor of how good this team can be. So I expect them to definitely be competitive in the division, but obviously I don't have them as a favorite to win it. Now, you said the Chargers were in full rebuild mode. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. They're one of those teams that was hit hard by the injury bug. But they have a lot of weapons still, even with Phillip Rivers gone. And they have Austin Eckler, who they just signed to an extension. Some really nice pieces on the defensive side of the ball, by the way. If they can get the quarterback situation figured out, the Chargers could surprise some people. But again, I don't know if they're going to challenge the Chiefs for the division title. The Broncos are a really intriguing team to me. I mean, I have side bets going on with my colleagues. I think the Broncos are going to have a winning record this year. I mean, Drew Lock showed us shades of greatness, even though he only played in like 5 games last year. And like you mentioned, they did a great job acquiring talent. I mean, they even went out and got his former Missouri tight end, Albert O, to bring in and pair with Noah Fant, which I thought was a great move. We don't even have to mention Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. Those guys should be able to come in and make an immediate impact. So we all know the Broncos have a great defense. It really now just hinges on that offense. Can it be as explosive? Can they keep up with the Kansas City Chiefs? If you ask me, I think they're the number 2 team in the division, and I think they get to the postseason.
All right, so as we close this out, I'm going to put you on the spot, but if you don't want to answer it, it's completely fine. When you look at AFC, like I said, we're in mid-August here. Who do you think is the best team and could represent the conference in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, so I guess I can go on record with this because I already published this a couple times for CBS. But the Baltimore Ravens are my Super Bowl pick. I think that it's going to be they'll either match up with the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, or whatever happens, the Ravens will get to the AFC Championship game. They took their lumps last year. I mean, they had the regular season. They're the regular season champs, 14-2. The MVP was Lamar Jackson. But of course, they're still a young team. They had to really take their lumps in the postseason to move forward. They kind of remind me of the Chiefs, right? They're on the same track, right? Patrick Mahomes, his first full year as a starter, he wins the MVP. Lamar Jackson's first full year as a starter, he wins the MVP. Loses in the postseason, the Chiefs bounce right back, get to the Super Bowl and win it. I feel like the Ravens are kind of on that same track. Which is why I believe that they will still. I don't think they go 14-2. I think that they could go even 11-5 or 12-4. Get to the postseason, finish the deal, get to the Super Bowl, and beat whoever it is, the San Francisco 49ers or the New Orleans Saints. So the Ravens are my pick.
All right, sounds good. I'm actually in line with that too. Right now, if you'd ask me who I think as well, so it's going to be fun. I can't wait till the NFL season starts that Thursday night. The first game between the Chiefs and the Texans is going to be fun. And Jordan, this has been fun as well, having you on the podcast. First time having you on, so I do appreciate you taking the time coming on the show. And if the listeners wanted to follow you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, check me out on Twitter at Jordan Dajani. That's Dajani. We're always pumping out good material on CBSSports.com. There's no such thing as an off season for us. We're gearing up for the regular season. Come COVID, no one cares. We're still pushing forward. So check us out there.
All right, sounds good. And Jordan, once again, appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. Thank you again to Jordan Dajani for being on today's show. Really had a great time talking the AFC with him. He likes the Ravens. I like the Ravens. Who do you like in the AFC? Let me know. Hit me up on social media at PJordanSEC. You can leave a comment, a review on Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Also on Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com if you have a question for the show. Really hoping to do some mailbag. So hit me up on social media or email me and let me know your thoughts on anything going on out there. And it don't have to be football, just whatever's going on. Just hit me up and give me your thoughts. Like I said, be back on Thursday with Troy Sadowski. Looking forward to getting his thoughts on everything going on, get a former player's perspective. And also, look, the SEC schedule came out, so I'll be sure to talk about that with Troy, especially the Georgia schedule, and get his thoughts on Georgia this upcoming season as well. Hope everybody has a great first part of the week, and I'll talk to you on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you for checking out today's Phillip Jordan Football Podcast. Find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Contact Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC or email at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com.